things change, and right now things are changing politically quite a bit. Kamala Harris ran for president as candidate of the establishment. She was supported by some of the very conservative politicians around and some very liberal politicians as well, all supporting the establishment. Donald Trump ran as an anti-establishment candidate. He was supported by people who had a beef or two with Biden or Harris, by some very hardline fascists. Left-wing candidates ran as anti-establishment candidates in this situation were irrelevant, although a couple of them did excellent work keeping the issue of the Gaza genocide in front of people. Lots of people are now discussing how Trump could have won and what the implications are for all of us going forward. That's good, and I hope we soon figure it out. But there's another aspect to this process that needs to be done. Why do we think that the rules of the game are the only way to go? How can we think outside the box? I'm glad you're able to join me today in Facing Reality for Social Justice as we talk to a couple of people from Carbondale, Illinois, a college town in southern Illinois, who are using their imagination and their art and their poetry to tear down walls of ordinary perception. They're a part of a group that uses a journal, Locust Review, and a podcast, Locust Radio, and a space, the Born Again Labor Museum. All of these things to challenge us, to think about things differently, about our lives, our future, and our past. Tish and Adam Turl are both from central and southern Illinois and connected to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. Tish is working on a master's degree of fine arts at SIU, and Adam has an MFA from the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Art in St. Louis. Before we get to the conversation today, we'll have Tish read one of her poems, Immortality Beaver. After the conversation, stick around as we listen to some music composed by members of their group. But first, here's Tish.
The beam of light came from the beaver, a shiny plastic statue grinning wide with mesh teeth. A fast food worker's tired voice crackled, "Welcome to Woody's Chomper Palace. What can I do for you today?" Something hit me in the chest. I thought the beaver statue arced an electric bolt that killed me, but I wasn't dead. The worker's voice was muddled. "What?" I started. "What do you want?" the worker snapped. "Sorry, can I have a Woody burger with cheese and a medium vanilla chipper chili chompachino?" I pulled back onto the highway. I didn't see the truck that hit my car until after the accident, until I had crawled, somehow unharmed, from the crinkled wreck. I went back to work. But I hid in the bathroom for 45 minutes, trying to calm the panic of working retail while the sun ate the earth. When I stepped out of the employee restroom, there was a small box on the break room table with the word Wren's written on it. The box was wrapped in a green bow. There was a tag with a name. When I opened it, there was a generous handful of candy and a book about a man named Fedorov. When I opened the book, a note fell out that read, "We're working on sending people backwards and forwards. It should be no time at all until we see you, but aiming will probably be difficult, at least at first. Most importantly, we apologize about the state of your immortality. This was meant to happen much closer to the point of your retrieval. The communist resurrection cult, as far as we can tell, is still quite young. Experiments, though successful, have also yielded some regrettable results. We understand capitalism does not lend itself to longevity of any kind, and we will send care packages as we are able. Solidarity, comrade. Know that you will be coming to your own rescue very soon."
So welcome both Adam and Tish to the show today, to the podcast. And one of the things I think is really important is that around the country right now, there's a lot of concern about the future. Politically, economically, socially, you name it, there's concern. And I guess that concern can be broken down in a couple of different ways, but you guys are doing something, I think, extremely important as a center for activity and thought and a way of exploring the world in Carbondale, Illinois. And I think that's a good place to take a look at what's going on with you guys and what's going on with your neighborhood and the people that you're working with. And you have a lot of different things that you are a part of and that you're doing. So I'd like to start this way. And Tish, I'd like to ask you, I was looking around on one of the websites that you have, And there's a thing that I saw that I thought might give us a little bit of an idea of what you're trying to do, give us a little bit of an approach to how to go forward. You're holding a sign, and you said, and the sign says, there's nothing wrong with time travel. What's that mean? I mean,
well, we were just kind of talking about time travel, I guess, and I started thinking like, this trope exists about time travel and things like was it The Sound of Thunder, where like you go back, you step on the moth or the butterfly, and then you come back and you've got fascism because you irreparably changed time, right? So I thought like, well, in actuality, if this sort of thing existed and was made illegal, like in the way that everything that is made illegal is like it's illegal for us, and it's like a certain amount of money for people with no limit to their money, right? Like the wealthy can do pretty much whatever they want. And I also thought like, well, this trope probably exists or could be thought to exist because like if the power structure that exists could be toppled by someone who wants to go back in time and like what the trope is, what the other thing is where it's like go back in time and kill baby Hitler, right? Like that sounds like a great idea. That'd be something we do, obviously. The only reason that you wouldn't do that is because you like what Hitler did, right? So like I was like, this is a trope that maybe exists so that the people in power stay in power.
There's I think an aspect of like capitalist realism. It's this concept that the cultural critic Mark Fisher had about in our hard to imagine anything outside the limits of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And he was writing at a particular moment, 2009, I think is when that book came out. The book was titled, Is There No Alternative? Referencing the British Prime Minister, former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's note that there was no alternative to free market capitalism or whatever. Yeah. And I think that trope is sort of the culture internalizing that kind of capitalist realism. The reason to not go back and change history would be because, and this is all fictional and so on,
of course, yeah,
would be because this is the best of all possible world. But really, if you could go back and undo fascism, reverse manifest destiny, reverse colonialism, abolish slavery or get rid of slavery, who and whose interest would that be inconceivable for, right? Yeah. And these kind of things permeate the entire culture. And it's part of the reason why the Democratic Party lost the election this week. Mm-hmm. And we've got the second Trump administration is because there was no narrative outside of capitalist realism coming from the political center or what could have been a viable left electoral alternative. So all people got was capitalist realism, neoliberalism, maybe with a few tweaks. But people can't afford groceries. People can't afford to eat. People can't afford their rent. People can barely afford their health insurance. Right. So they're not getting an explanation, a story, or anything around that. So we're left in this constant pull back to the right, and the collapse of the center.
Well, okay, that's a good way of pulling together, I think, what There's Nothing Wrong with Time Travel says, which is both it's political, it's thought-provoking in the sense that you have to think outside the box. You have to think what are the possibilities, what were the possibilities, if you will, that went in a different direction. And one of the things that you guys are doing in Carbondale is not just thinking about it, but you also have organization around it. You have a number of different things, obviously. A podcast, a review, a museum. And I'd like to sort of touch on some of those things as we go along to show that there's a relationship here between the ideas that you have about what the world should be and the organization behind how to get to that point. So let's take a look at some of the things that you might be interested in doing. I think one of the ways to look at it is that your organizations, the Born Again Labor Museum being one of them, it's not particularly new. It's not particularly from Carbondale. You brought it to Carbondale from someplace else. And so you guys have been doing that for a while. And so could you both give us a little bit of a sense of what we're trying to do with the relationship between labor and thought and ideas and thinking outside the box that sort of gives you the spirit to get up in the morning to try to figure out which way to go. So, Tish, you want to...
Sure. Well, I guess to right at the end there, I guess the thing about what we're doing at like Balm, especially, I think that helps me get up in the morning is that like this is sort of so my big thing is fan fiction for and about the working class, right? And Balm feels like the physical embodiment of that. You know, there are the photographs with the ash and the cotton, of all of these historic moments of struggle, hanging around Adam's paintings, which are sometimes inspired by my work, but sometimes just sort of responses to life. So like working to like try to represent and glorify everything that we're representing and glorifying for a big drive for me to get up in the morning. Like that's what keeps me writing. Like I have a constant internal struggle with the voice of capitalism in my head telling me that what I'm writing isn't good enough. And I have to remember that actually, like, that's been the thing my whole life. But then when I gave people my stories or I wrote stories for people, like, they felt delight in being able to see themselves, and the commonalities that we
Yeah.
have.
I think that.
No,
Oh,
no,
sorry, go ahead, Wayne,
I
sorry.
just wanted to follow up on that a little bit, Tish. One of the things, when I read some of the, listened actually to some of the poems that you were writing, some of the works that you were writing, it seemed to me that you were you're explaining the world with some wit, some humor, a rather strong dash of anger, I guess, or you could say frustration with how things are seen by people. And so there's a relationship of how you see the world and how you want to explain the world to the people who listen to your recordings or read your poetry. You see that relationship as being important to what you're trying to do as well. So where does that come from? I mean, do you see that relationship between your poetry and what people are thinking as being something that's going to give direction to some of the ideas that they might have about which way to move forward? What are you trying to do with it?
Yeah, I guess I mean the humor and the anger thing, like that's sort of been a place that I've written from forever. Because I think that those are two things that people feel a lot, you know, like the absurdity of the situation that they're also angry about. And I think that trying to connect with people, I'm always trying to represent something that I know people are feeling and that they're thinking that they want to do, almost like I'm wanting to give them permission in the way that sometimes when I'm reading work, I wish that it was giving me permission to feel the way that I do. I think that there's a lot of media that sort of touches on anti-capitalism, but doesn't have the anger and it doesn't have the humor about the absurdity.
Right. Okay.
It just sort of gestures at this being a thing that we all hate. Yeah.
There can also be kind of an apologetics
Yes.
to a lot of like ostensibly anti-capitalist dystopia material where it becomes so ubiquitous and doesn't necessarily provide a sense of possibility out of the horror.
Right.
And this is a contradiction we see with, I think, realism in a lot of cases where, on the one hand, it's really important that we have video documentation of police violence. At the same time, an isolated image of police violence conceals the real weakness of the police, that they're a minority, even against the oppressed group, the certain groups they oppress the most, but also a minority in relationship, of course, to the working class as a whole. So that one realistic slice of life conceals some aspects of the social relation that are larger. And one of the things like we do, Tish does in the writing, and that our comrades at Locust Review do is try to create counter imaginaries to that sort of capitalist realism. And this is influenced heavily by something that Michel Louis, the comrade from the Brazilian French comrade, calls critical irrealism. And for Baum, one of the lessons from modern art was everything around an art object, gesture, text, or image impacts the meaning of that gesture, object, image, or text. So that's one of the reasons why we've situated Baum here in Carbondale, which is a working class college town. It's a university that has historically served first generation college students. We also have an organic connection to the working class here. We won't be contributing to gentrification. We can use our art space in solidarity with folks organizing in DSA or the workers that were organizing Starbucks Workers Union, people working on abortion rights after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and try to have the world, the things that are around our art, as well as the content of our art,
Right.
be located with the class, working class folks, it's students, it's people organizing, to protect abortion clinics, it's people organizing to help relocate trans and queer people here to our relatively safe town, comparative to people fleeing Kentucky and Missouri, where a lot of draconian anti-queer, anti-trans.
Let's see if we could talk about that a little bit. I mean, what you are also doing, you have a collective it's an international collective. So you have people from many different places thinking and writing about issues that are important to them, and obviously important to other people in the collective as well. But you're also part of your community. And I think that's sometimes can be a quite difficult thing to do, is to combine a lot of that. But you seem to be very energetic in the work that you're doing. So, but when you say that you're part of that community, what is that? How does that look? I know at one point there you had a nice sign that you put out there someplace that says, "Need a free communist manifesto, give you a call." So what kind of relationship do you have? I mean, how does your community see you? It sounds like it's not so much an isolated group within a larger community, but you do have a community there that you're relating to, and that's fairly important as well.
Well, Carbondale is an interesting place, right? It's I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of heterotopic spaces or third spaces. It's this idea that, well, there's this sort of idea that there are these spaces within capitalism that are neither really anti-capitalist, nor are they fully consumed by market relations. Of course, everything in capitalism is ultimately disciplined by the market, exploitation, oppression, capitalist ideology. But there have been these sort of hybrid spaces through the years that have been important, particularly in culture, but also in political movements, like during the Chartist movement, the early labor movement in Britain, for example, pubs, working class pubs, where people would read the Chartist newspaper to other working class people who couldn't read, or in Montmartre in Paris, where you had a mixture of socialists and anarchists and sort of declassed aristocrats and artists, and there was this sort of intellectual ferment in the 1800s there. Or you could think of independent record shops or things like that, or the coffee shops that were set up near military bases by anti-war soldiers and peace activists during the Vietnam War. Carbondale's kind of a town that's kind of like that in a way. In 1972, it was the only county in Illinois that didn't vote for Richard Nixon, including Cook County and Chicago. Long history of struggle here. Student strikes, obviously in 1970. Lots of coal mining strikes in the areas around. The Progressive Miners of America were important in the 1930s here, which was started or partially started, I can't remember, by the Communist Party. And so there's this, and there's also this long history of punk houses in town that have been connected at various moments to social movements and stuff like that. And there's anarchists and queer activists and socialists and so on in town. And obviously there's drama everywhere and there's political differences everywhere, but for the most part, people try to get along and work together on things that are important. So, for example, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and when anti-trans laws were being passed across the South and parts of the Midwest and plains and some of the mountain states, a group was formed here to help raise money to help move people here that were having to leave places like Florida, Texas, Kentucky, and stuff like that. We raised, not just us, but the community raised thousands and thousands of dollars to help relocate people here, help them find an apartment, find jobs, and stuff like that. And we knew a lot of the people involved with that. And we were really happy that when the union organizing started at the Starbucks, one of the Starbuckses here, that we were able to lend Balm as a meeting hall for the workers there. So they could meet without being spied on by management. And it was convenient because when we had Balm as a storefront, now it's in a sort of detached ranch house, but which makes it sound fancier, way fancier than like there's no ranch. But why is it anyway? The Starbucks workers met at Balm and organized, and they won their unionization vote. But of course, they're facing the same trouble everybody's facing around that about getting an actual contract.
Now, you're both from Southern Illinois, is that right?
I'm actually from Central Illinois, so that's part of what I really like about Carbondale because there's this sort of there's the factory left in my hometown. It's a very small area, very racist, primarily white, very red. So this feels like that, but with a community that feels like taking
That's
care
a
of
nice
each other.
combination. Adam,
Yeah.
how about yourself? I mean, what I'm trying to get at, are you part of your roots in some way? I mean, you when you go to school or you travel or you have different organizations that you're part of what you were before, but obviously you change. And how does that relate to the people who are still there? I mean, it's people who've go to work every day, who go by your store or your ranch house, whatever it happens to be. Is there a relationship there, or is there really a division with, especially going forward now? I mean, things are really up in the air, I think. But how do you see things going forward with that work that you're trying to do down there?
Well, I'm from here, and this is the town I grew up in. And although I was born in upstate New York, but I my family moved here when I was just under 3 years old. I grew up here, and then of course because we met when I was in
Yeah.
Chicago. I've lived in Wisconsin, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in Las Vegas and St. Louis, and have been lucky enough to travel, but part of what we were thinking, I mean, I think this is true politically, but also in the arts. I don't, what was that cowboy, witty cowboy guy, Roy Rogers?
Oh yeah.
There was an old joke about I think he told about preachers that they were like manure, and so like spread out. In his mind, they were good for the country or good for the environment or whatever. But you put them all together, and it smells like crap.
And Roy Rogers,
I
that
had,
wasn't, by the way. I mean, that's
but like I think there's a similar. It's important for artists to be spread out because really a lot of the people who make a living in the arts are concentrated in New York and LA. And then I think also the left is concentrated in a few cities to some degree, but we need to be organically connected to the working class and the social movements and things like that. And it's possible for us, and especially for me, being from here, to do that here in a way that would be more difficult in another context. And I also think that that's connected. Our comrade Anupam Roy, who's an artist and a socialist in India, I think it's part of praxis. Having a practice, both as a Marxist and as an artist, is to be in this dialectical relationship with the class on an everyday life, not just as a theoretical point or a historical point, but something you do every day. And it doesn't mean that you have a utilitarian point of view about your neighbors, like they're human beings, right? And that's one of the things about art too, is that art makes you not have a utilitarian point of view about the people that you are talking about or sharing the
well,
work
when you
with.
said, like what I was saying earlier to Tish, there's nothing wrong with time travel. That is an exciting idea for people, I think, that there's something different, different possibilities exist from what they have. Now, that could go a lot of different directions. People who supported Trump, I think, to some extent have the same kind of an idea that things are not the way they should be, and there should be some changes as well. But what you obviously are doing is giving a direction that says, no, there is a connection between your ideas, your politics, and what you're trying to do with not only locally, but nationally and internationally with helping working people around the world. When you look at your collective, do you see that as a collective, as a political approach to try to build some kind of organization internationally, or you see yourself as an art collective, or exactly how do you see yourselves? Tish, how do you see yourselves?
I guess I see us as kind of both things, right? Because everything is sort of political, and obviously we're very geared towards our political feelings. But I think primarily for me, I see us as an art collective. I don't know. I think that is. Just something that feels really not actually that different from being a political collective anyway.
Well, I think it's partly because, and this is something that the Austrian Marxist art critic Ernst Fischer talked about. I mean, art is a the idea of art is fairly recent, a few hundred years old. But what we call art goes back to hunter-gatherer times, cave paintings, sculptures, what used to be called Venus figurines,
Right.
But are now called the woman figurines, and so on. And what he argues that art has this sort of weird dual social and spiritual aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this sort of existential connection to the universe. It's about feelings, emotions, expression, but it's also about the social relationships you have with everybody around you and with the natural and material world. And so art can't be reduced to politics, but it can't be separated from politics at the same time. And I think that's one of the things that runs through everybody at Locust Review, the different comrades involved in that. And it's something we try to get in our work, partly because when we see that expressive, lowercase s spiritual aspect of things, or write it off as woolly-headed thinking, we cede that ground to the right. Because the political center generally eschews that, at least culturally. Everything's neoliberalism is supposed to be scientific. You just tweak with the system. You ignore the pathos and the pain that is happening in towns and neighborhoods in the Rust Belt and poor rural areas in certain parts of the cities, which is why Harris lost. Whereas when that pain is addressed, people will respond to their pain being addressed. So like you mentioned, Wayne, the signs we put up, call 188 whatever for a free communist manifesto. That was inspired by the signs that were put up all over town. Those yard signs that get put up like, call this number for a free Bible in both English and Spanish. And we're like, well, let's do that with the Communist Manifesto. We've actually just made signs like that say legalize time travel. Based on Tish's idea that the trope against time travel is bourgeois. And I also make what we call born again labor tracts, which are based on those Bible tracts, if you're familiar with those from, they still exist, but back in the day were little cartoons where, I don't know, Billy thinks Jesus isn't cool, so he smokes pot and has sex and goes to hell, it beats demons. But we made one where it's like, this little girl who's based on the ad from the LBJ campaign with the atomic bomb is like, I don't want to die. And then, there's got to be a better way. And then a demon says, there is. You can live forever with communism. So trying to, again, cut against the stultification of the radical imagination, but not ignoring the sort of feelings, that we have and that other people around us have in pursuit of so because we're not trying to create a political, we're not trying to create the 12th International or something like that. A lot of us are in different political groups, probably, revolutionary Marxists. Some of us are like kind of want to be revolutionary Marxists, but are frustrated. Like some of us come from Trotskyist backgrounds, some from Maoist backgrounds. That kind of thing.
A lot of that, I think, is being rethought these days, trying to figure out exactly which way to go forward. And one of the things I think that can help do that is the aspect of culture within our society pulls people together sometimes in a way that gives us a way of understanding each other, which is really important. I remember Phil Oakes was so important for whatever your politics were. You knew that there was something you could relate to in his music. And if you see some pictures just about time travel or to get a free Communist Manifesto, that gives you a sense of there's a reality that you're part of in a different kind of a way. Now, you guys are also very active in a number of different ways of explaining your ideas and explaining the direction you want to go in. You have a podcast, you have the review, the Born Again Labor Museum. One of the things you could, if you don't mind right now, if you give us a couple websites so people could look up some of the things that you do, if they're interested in getting an idea of where you're coming from.
Well, they can find us at bornagainlabor.com, if they're interested also more specifically in just us, they could find us at turlstudio.art. Is that right? Turlart.
Turl, it's one of those. Turlstudio.art.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, turlstudio.art. And then, of course, there's locustview.com, which they can find, they can sample some of the past printed material. They can subscribe if they're interested. Patreon.com/locustreview, I think, is another one, although that feels really gross and pluggy to say. So maybe just blank that out if you just put a beep over me saying that.
No.
But I mean, if people were interested enough, that would be also a way for them to. You don't have to even pay money actually on Patreon to subscribe to us.
No,
so.
you're doing a lot of stuff, so I think that's an important, and you're approaching it in different ways as well. One of the things, obviously, I like is audio with the podcasts, and you do that fairly frequently. And what are you trying to do with that? I mean, do you have the same audience in mind? For instance, when you do something with the Labor Museum, or if you write an article with a review, or if you're going to do something for a podcast, are they sort of separate in your own minds with the people you're talking to or about, or is there something that pulls this all together? That's more or less what I'm trying to ask, I guess.
There's a Venn diagram in my head and with maybe more emphasis on one part of it or another, depending for everything we do. And that Venn diagram is three things. It's, the class, the working class, the left, and then people who love art. So I think that's who I think of when we're making work, when, maybe when we're writing about making work, we're arguing more with other artists or other leftists. Really, those are the overlapping audiences or patrons or constituencies or communities that I want to be in conversation with. Other comrades, our working class siblings, and other artists. Be like, what kind of culture are we trying to create that we're not leaving things out, that we're trying to challenge the stultification of capitalist realism? Like, another thing we do is we put up, we have the yard signs and stuff we do, but we also put up irrealist historical markers that are based on things that people in Locust have written, but especially things that Tish has written, where we put up signs that sort of like reclaim various territories for imaginations, or what we call, again, counter imaginaries against capitalist realism. Like, we put up a sign for a short story that Tish wrote about a discarded working class robot that gets thrown into a sewer and comes out of the sewer. It becomes a mass shooter, basically. And we put up a historical marker for that. We put up a historical marker for a short story where in the future, thousands of years in the future, after a successful communist revolution, they start sending people back in time to make everybody who ever lived immortal and acclimate them to an equal, just, and free society. And one of the ways they do that is by sending an electric shock through a sculpture of a beaver at a fast food restaurant drive-through. And that was called Immortality Beaver, the story. We put up a sign commemorating the future location of the Immortality Beaver next to an abandoned fast food restaurant here in town. Some of them are more explicitly political. Some of them are just absurd. Some of them are trying to get people to imagine other things. Right. But we do that as sort of trying to reclaim the town.
Think that's extremely important. I mean, I think what you're doing is you're touching people in their imaginations. You can't give people an imagination; they have it on their own, and it's a question of can you touch them, or where is that going to go? Years ago, when I was working in a factory, I had a little pamphlet I used to give out to people called "Life in the Factory." It was actually produced by a group called Facing Reality way back then. A little bit where I got the inspiration for the title for this podcast, and I gave it to a guy once. And I said, be a little careful. It's a little lefty and stuff like that. And about 5 minutes later, he had a group of about 5 or 6 people around him reading to them about life in the factory, the stuff that they knew that they were able to relate to. And it gave them a sense, if you will, of the time travel, if things were different. But this was their life that they were thinking about. And they saw that in a little pamphlet. And I think the same kind of thing can be done with the kinds of stuff that you guys are doing. That the articles, I mean, some of the stuff I've seen that you've done, and I know, Adam, some of the things that you've Written, it will take me a week and a half just to get through a couple of chapters. But at the same time, it's talking to people who are looking for a way to understand who they are. And I think that's extremely important and seem to be doing a fairly effective way of doing that. And you have a podcast as well. Where can people listen to your radio show?
Oh, they can find us Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you can find podcasts. We are there.
There's also links on our website.
Yes, yeah, they can also go to our website and find.
And this Locust Radio is the name of the podcast.
Yes, Locust. Yes, Locust Radio is our podcast. Yeah.
Beautiful, excellent. Tish, you're a very good reader, by the way, of your poetry. I'd like to get some of that on. And down the road, maybe we could talk some more about some of the more specific things that you're trying to do. Or maybe when it comes out, Adam, send me a copy of Gothic Capitalism, and we could look at the different ideas that are involved in where you guys have been, where you're going, and what you're trying to do with all the things that are going on.
I apologize about the density of some of the art theory writing. There was this sort of convoluted break in art world stuff from the modern ideal of art for art's sake, which we criticize from the left, but towards an even worse sort of everything's meaningless kind of point of view, and it got really convoluted. So a lot of that stuff is an argument with that.
No, I think it's fine. I wasn't knocking it. What I was saying is that you need to be in the mood, my friend, because it takes a little bit of time and effort to see where things are going. And if you have the time and effort, you get a lot out of putting your time into understanding what people are thinking about the world and trying to see how that relates to what you're trying to do as well. So anyway, thank you, Tish. Thank you, Adam. I'd like to talk again sometime about your collective, because I think that's an important thing that you're trying to do, pull something together internationally like that. And I wish you much luck with it. And I look forward to talking to you guys again. Okay? Good luck with what you're doing.
Thanks, Wayne.
This was a song by the Carbondale punk band Pet Mosquito, entitled I Hate Illinois Nazis. Not a bad title. The band is not affiliated with Baum or Locust Review, but they've shared their music on Locust Radio, and we're sharing it here. You can find their music at petmosquito.bandcamp.com. Here's another work, this time from Omnia Soul. This was a work called Unsent Messages. Omnia Soul is a video, audio, performance, print, and mixed media artist based in Chicago and currently working on an MFA at the School of the Art Institute. They are a member of the Locust Collective, and you can find more of their sound art and music at omniasolaartbandcamp.com. Thanks for joining us today. It's a complicated world, and it's a good thing that groups like Locust Collective are around to challenge us on our perspectives of the past and, of course, on our future. I think it's especially nice that groups like Locust exist in Carbondale, Illinois, and other towns around the country. We're going to have difficult times ahead of us, and it helps us tremendously when we can think outside of the box before the box closes in on us. Corny, huh? Well, that's okay. I'm Wayne Heimbach.